Welcome top news today.
As China's top leadership gather next week to set key economic policies for next year, they cannot neglect three looming threats from across the Pacific: interest rate rises by the Federal Reserve that may attract money away from Chinese markets, Washington's confrontational trade stance against Beijing, and U.S. President Donald Trump's tax regime overhaul that might suck long-term investment from China. While the close-the-door annual Central Economic Work Conference, the biggest economic policy-making meeting of the ruling Communist Party elite, is unlikely to specifically mention Trump and his policies in its final statement, the three issues have become elephants in the room for Xi and his team formulating China's economic policies, according to analysts. The Fed is only halfway through its program of raising interest rates and shrinking its balance sheet, a process that will continue throughout 2018 following an expected quarter-of percentage point raise on Wednesday. Coupled with a corporate tax cut that may become U.S. law starting from next year, China and other emerging countries are set to face greater pressures of an exodus of capital and currency depreciation. China to set 2018 policies during upcoming annual economic work conference in Beijing. For China in particular, Washington and Brussels are ramping up pressure on trade, particularly within the World Trade Organization, a development that could make it harder for China to export products to key markets. As WTO trade ministers gathered in Buenos Aires this week, the U.S. is publicly questioning the world trading system that has helped China's boom over the past 16 years. A sense of nervousness is also felt among Chinese government advisors and even policymakers after Trump managed to push through his tax overhaul plan through the House of Representatives and the Senate, according to Huo Jiangguo, the former research head at China's Commerce Ministry. Huo said the Trump tax bill, which simplified 7 tiers of personal income taxes into 3 and cut the top corporate tax rate to 20% from 35%, could set in motion a global race to slash taxes to attract capital at a time when Beijing is already struggling to retain and attract foreign investors. Huo added the impact would not be immediate. When the panic is over, the conclusion is that the impact will not be huge and it will take time for the U.S. to fully implement the new tax policy, Huo said. The Chinese government has been paying lip service to tax cuts for years, but has boasted 1 trillion yuan $150 billion worth of reduced tax burdens by shifting from business to value-added taxes. Data from China's finance ministry, however, shows the government's fiscal revenues grew 8.4% in the first 11 months of the year from a year earlier, a rate higher than headline economic growth rate. Dilemma of growth and debt control to bedevil China in 2018, Moody's says. A global competitiveness report released by the World Economic Forum in September suggested China's overall tax burden was 68%, which put it 132nd among the 137 economies studied. The rate was 44% in the United States, 48.9% in Germany, 30.9% in the UK, and 19.1% in Singapore. David Dollar, a senior fellow at the Washington-based Brookings Institution, said the U.S. tax cuts would increase the nation's fiscal deficit and raise the value of the U.S. dollar. This development, in turn, could lead to a bigger U.S. trade deficit and further harm U.S.-China trade relations. The U.S. trade deficit will worsen because of these U.S. policies, but there is a risk that the administration will blame China and other partners and introduce protectionist measures, he said. I expect U.S.-China trade relations to be volatile going forward. The trade gap between the world's two largest economies has been a frequent cause for complaint from Trump since he was on the election campaign trail. China is the largest source of the U.S. trade deficit, with a deficit of